Suffering is an inevitable and universal part of the human experience. It takes many forms, whether through personal loss, illness, relational struggles, or the challenges we face in our work and daily lives. No one is exempt from facing moments of pain, hardship, or trial. While suffering often brings deep emotional or physical anguish, it also serves a purpose that is far greater than what we may see in the moment. In many cases, suffering can be a tool that God uses to sharpen our souls, preparing us for something greater. When we are in the midst of suffering, it's natural to question its meaning or to wonder why it's part of our journey. Often, the pain and hardship feel overwhelming and unjust. However, the Bible tells us that suffering is not random or without purpose. Through suffering, God seeks to refine our hearts, deepen our faith, and draw us closer to Him. It is a process that challenges us, transforms us, and ultimately leads us toward fulfilling a higher calling. God does not allow us to suffer without reason. While it can be hard to see in the midst of pain, suffering is part of His divine plan to refine us. It is through these trials that God helps us develop qualities such as faith, patience, endurance, and resilience. These traits are essential to our spiritual growth and the fulfillment of the mission we are called to. When we face suffering, we often find that it forces us to rely on God in ways we might not have done otherwise. Suffering acts as a purifier for our souls. It strips away the superficial layers of our existence and exposes what is truly important: our faith in God, our trust in His plan, and our ability to love and serve others in the midst of hardship. As we endure and overcome pain, we are spiritually refined, becoming stronger and more attuned to God's purpose for our lives. In a way, suffering is a tool that shapes us into the people we are meant to be. Just as a piece of raw metal must go through a refining process to become a sharp blade, our souls must endure hardship to be shaped for a greater mission. This process of soul refinement isn't easy, but it is essential for our spiritual development. The purpose of this article is to explore how suffering can be a means through which God refines our souls. We will examine how these painful experiences, when viewed through the lens of faith, can help us grow spiritually, increase our resilience, and bring us closer to the higher purpose God has designed for our lives. Through suffering, we are not just enduring pain, but being prepared for a greater mission, one that aligns us with God's divine plan and purpose. Suffering is one of the most profound and challenging experiences in life. When we face trials, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, our faith is often tested. It is during these moments of hardship and vulnerability that our faith can be strengthened or weakened. While suffering may make us feel weak, lost, or uncertain, it is precisely in these times of struggle that God refines and strengthens our faith, often in ways we do not understand at the moment. Faith is not merely a belief in times of ease and comfort, but it is most powerful when we are faced with difficulties. Suffering challenges us to trust in God's sovereignty, even when we cannot see the end result. It calls us to lean on His strength when our own reserves are depleted. When we experience suffering, it may seem like God is distant or silent, but in reality, it is often in these quiet and painful moments that God's presence is most profoundly felt. The testing of faith through suffering is a process that refines our character and brings us closer to the truth that God is faithful and good, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. Suffering forces us to confront our limitations and weaknesses, and in the process, we learn to depend on God's strength and grace rather than our own. It is through suffering that we come to realize that our faith is not based on what we can see or feel, but on the unshakable truth that God's love and providence are always with us, even in the darkest moments. When we face suffering, we are called to respond not by turning away from God in anger or confusion, but by turning to Him with trust and dependence. It is through this process of turning to God in times of difficulty that our faith is tested, refined, and strengthened. We are invited to rely not on our own understanding, but on God's wisdom, knowing that He has a purpose for every trial we face. The Bible provides many examples of faithful individuals who faced immense suffering, yet remained steadfast in their belief in God. These stories serve as powerful reminders that suffering, though painful, can lead to a stronger, more refined faith. One of the most poignant examples is that of Job. Job is a man who, in a matter of moments, lost everything, his wealth, his health, and his family. His life was turned upside down, and he was left in a state of deep despair. Despite his immense suffering, Job did not curse God or abandon his faith. Instead, he wrestled with his pain and grief, but he never denied God's existence or sovereignty. In Job 13 verse 15, he famously declares, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." Job's faith in God was unwavering, even in the face of his unimaginable suffering. His story illustrates how suffering can strengthen faith, as Job's relationship with God deepened and grew through his trials. Similarly, Abraham is another biblical figure whose faith was tested through suffering. God promised Abraham that he would become the father of many nations, yet he and his wife Sarah remained childless for many years. Finally, when Abraham's son Isaac was born, God asked him to sacrifice Isaac as an offering. Abraham was willing to obey, even though the command was agonizing and seemed to contradict God's promise. Through his willingness to sacrifice what was most precious to him, Abraham's faith was proven, and he became the father of a great nation, as God had promised. Abraham's trust in God's plan, even when it was incomprehensible, serves as a model of how faith can be strengthened through suffering and trials. Another example of faith under suffering is Jesus Christ, who, though sinless, endured unimaginable suffering on the cross. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed to God, expressing his anguish and asking if there was another way to fulfill God's plan. Yet, despite his sorrow and suffering, he submitted to God's will, saying, "Not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22 verse 42. Jesus' willingness to endure pain and death for the sake of humanity's salvation is the ultimate example of faith being tested and strengthened through suffering. His sacrifice allows believers to understand that suffering is sometimes necessary for a greater good, and it serves as the ultimate example of how suffering can strengthen one's faith and purpose. In addition to prayer, suffering can deepen our relationship with God by helping us develop a deeper trust in His plan. When we are going through pain, it can be easy to doubt God's goodness or question His motives. But as we reflect on the stories of those who suffered in the Bible and on our own experiences, we come to understand that suffering is not a sign that God has abandoned us, it is often a part of His larger, redemptive plan. God is present in our suffering, using it to refine us, draw us closer to Him, and prepare us for the work He has planned for us. Furthermore, suffering teaches us to rely on God's grace and wisdom rather than our own understanding. In the midst of pain, we learn that we cannot always rely on our own strength to overcome adversity. Instead, we must surrender to God, trusting that His grace is sufficient for us. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9. Through suffering, we are reminded that our strength comes from Him alone, and that His power is made perfect in our weakness. Suffering has a unique way of teaching us patience. In our fast-paced world, where we are accustomed to immediate results and quick solutions, suffering forces us to slow down and confront the reality that not all things can be fixed immediately. When we endure loss, pain, or hardship, it is often tempting to seek an immediate resolution or relief. Yet, patience is the key virtue that suffering demands of us. We learn that life doesn't always unfold according to our desires or timelines, and sometimes, the resolution to our struggles requires waiting and trusting in God's perfect timing. This process of developing patience through suffering is not easy. It requires us to sit with our pain and discomfort, acknowledging that healing or answers might not come instantly. However, this very struggle teaches us resilience and endurance. We learn that waiting for God's plan to unfold does not mean inaction, it means trusting that God knows the right time for everything. In moments of suffering, we are called to surrender our desire for immediate answers and instead allow God to work in His time and according to His will. Patience in the face of suffering deepens our understanding of God's sovereignty. It helps us realize that we are not in control of everything, and that His ways are higher than ours. The psalmist reminds us in Psalm 27 verse 14, "Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord." This waiting is not a passive, resigned waiting but an active, trusting patience that acknowledges God's greater wisdom and plan. Through suffering, we come to understand that God's timing is always perfect, even when it seems delayed or confusing. The process of waiting teaches us that the journey itself has value, even if we do not yet see the full picture of what God is doing in our lives. As we learn to endure suffering with patience, we discover a profound sense of peace that comes from trusting that God is in control. The more we surrender our expectations and desires to Him, the more we are able to rest in His perfect timing. Patience during suffering, then, becomes not just a personal virtue but a spiritual practice that helps us align our hearts with God's will and grow in our relationship with Him. In addition to patience, suffering also sharpens our humility. When we face hardship, we are reminded that we are not in control of everything. Suffering strips away our illusions of self-sufficiency and opens our eyes to the reality that we need God. It forces us to confront our limitations and weaknesses, and in doing so, it teaches us to humbly accept our dependence on Him. Humility in the face of suffering helps us recognize that we cannot solve every problem on our own. Whether it is the pain of a personal loss, the strain of illness, or the challenges of navigating difficult relationships, we often find ourselves powerless to change our circumstances. Suffering teaches us to acknowledge that we are not all-knowing and that there are things beyond our understanding. This realization invites us to accept God's will, even when it is hard to grasp or seems unjust. The acceptance of God's will is central to how we respond to suffering. It is in accepting His will that we begin to experience peace, even in the midst of pain. As we learn to trust that God knows what is best for us, we are able to surrender our desire for control and begin to rest in His divine wisdom. This process of surrender does not come easily. It requires us to relinquish our expectations and embrace the reality that God's plan may look different from our own. But in that acceptance, we experience the beauty of humility, the willingness to submit to God's greater purpose and trust that He is working in us, even through our struggles. This humility is also reflected in our interactions with others. As we face suffering, we are reminded of our shared vulnerability as human beings. We are no longer distant or removed from others who are suffering, but we become more empathetic and compassionate. The humility we gain through suffering enables us to offer comfort, understanding, and support to others who are walking similar paths. We become more open to learning from God's guidance, more willing to rely on His strength, and more able to serve others in their pain. Suffering is not just about enduring pain or hardship, it is about undergoing transformation. In the process of enduring suffering with patience and humility, our souls are shaped and refined. This transformation is not a mere change in our outward circumstances but a deep, spiritual growth that takes place in the core of our being. As we experience suffering, we learn to see the world and our lives through a different lens. We begin to recognize the deeper purposes behind our struggles and understand the value of suffering in shaping our spiritual lives. Through suffering, we are purified. Our attachment to worldly comforts and desires often fades when we face challenges that we cannot control. We come to understand that material things and worldly success cannot bring lasting peace or fulfillment. Instead, it is through suffering that we are drawn closer to God, our true source of strength and hope. The Apostle Paul speaks about this in Romans 5 verses 3 to 4, saying, "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." This process of transformation is not immediate, but over time, suffering helps us develop perseverance and build character. As our character is refined, we begin to understand that suffering is not a sign of God's absence or disfavor, but rather an opportunity for growth and deepening faith. Suffering also helps us to appreciate the richness of life. In moments of hardship, we are often forced to examine what truly matters: the love of God, the support of others, and the ability to grow in virtue. Through suffering, we are given a more profound understanding of the value of love, compassion, and grace. We come to appreciate the small blessings in life that we may have previously taken for granted. Each trial becomes an opportunity to deepen our understanding of life's true meaning and purpose. Furthermore, suffering refines our relationship with God. It compels us to seek Him more earnestly, to rely on His strength, and to lean into His presence. As we face hardship, we become more aware of our own need for God and His grace, which leads to a deeper connection with Him. Our faith becomes more authentic as we learn to trust in God's goodness and sovereignty, even when we cannot see the end of the road. Ultimately, suffering transforms us into more compassionate, humble, and spiritually mature individuals. Through our struggles, we grow closer to God and become more attuned to His purposes for our lives. Our soul, once tested by hardship, becomes stronger and more refined, ready to carry out the work God has set before us. Suffering has a unique ability to draw us closer to understanding God's unconditional love for us. When we experience pain, hardship, or loss, we often feel isolated, as if the weight of the world is pressing down on us. However, it is in these moments of suffering that we are given an opportunity to grasp the depth of God's love for us. In times of hardship, we come to realize that God is not distant or removed from our pain, but He is present with us, walking alongside us through our suffering. Just as He sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to suffer and die for us, God demonstrates His love through His constant presence during our own trials. When we suffer, we often reflect on the sacrifice that Christ made on the cross. Jesus' suffering, although infinitely greater than anything we could experience, serves as a model of how to endure pain with grace and love. He bore the weight of humanity's sins, carrying an unimaginable burden, yet through it all, He never wavered in His love for us. In the same way, when we face our own suffering, we begin to understand how God's love is revealed through our hardship. We realize that His love for us does not fade when we experience pain, and in fact, it is in these moments that His love becomes more apparent and tangible. This understanding of God's love in the midst of suffering transforms how we view our pain. Instead of seeing it as something punitive or meaningless, we begin to recognize that our suffering can be a path that leads us closer to God's heart. Through our struggles, we are reminded that we are never alone. God's love is always with us, even when we cannot see or feel it. The Apostle Paul speaks about this in Romans 8 verses 35 to 39, where he declares that nothing can separate us from the love of God, neither death, nor life, nor anything in all creation. In our suffering, we are invited to experience this love in a more intimate and profound way. As we walk through suffering with the knowledge that God is with us, we learn to embrace His love, even when we feel weak or abandoned. It is during these difficult moments that we come to understand that God's love is not conditional on our circumstances. He loves us unconditionally, in every season of our lives, especially in our suffering. This realization helps us trust in His plan, even when we cannot understand it, and leads us to deeper gratitude for the love He freely gives. Suffering also teaches us one of the most important spiritual lessons: forgiveness. When we endure pain, especially the pain caused by others, we are faced with a choice: hold on to bitterness and anger or forgive. Forgiveness, however, is not always easy, particularly when the wounds are deep, and the hurt feels unforgivable. But suffering teaches us that forgiveness is essential for our healing, and it is one of the greatest lessons that God offers through our struggles. The ability to forgive, even when we are in pain, mirrors the forgiveness that Christ extended to us. On the cross, Jesus forgave those who had crucified Him, saying, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23 verse 34. His example teaches us that forgiveness is not contingent on the actions or worthiness of others but is an act of grace, extended freely to those who have hurt us. Through His suffering, Christ demonstrated that true love includes the willingness to forgive, even in the face of injustice. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting the wrongs done to us or excusing the behavior of others. Rather, it means releasing the hold that anger, resentment, and bitterness have over us. Suffering helps us see that holding on to unforgiveness only binds us to the pain and hurts of the past. It prevents us from moving forward in healing. When we choose to forgive, even in the midst of our own suffering, we free ourselves from the weight of emotional pain. Forgiveness allows us to release the burden of resentment and embrace the peace that God desires for us. It is important to note that forgiveness is not a one-time event, but a process. It may take time to forgive, especially when the hurt is deep, but as we surrender our pain to God, He provides the grace to forgive. When we forgive others, we not only honor God's will but also open our hearts to experience His love and healing more fully. Through forgiveness, our souls are set free from the chains of bitterness and hatred, and we begin to reflect the love of God in a way that heals both us and those around us. As we forgive, we experience a profound sense of healing. The combination of love and forgiveness is transformative, allowing us to heal in ways that surpass mere emotional recovery. When we forgive others, we release ourselves from the grip of past hurts and open ourselves to the possibility of restoration and wholeness. This process of healing goes beyond just emotional recovery. It touches the very core of our soul and brings us into alignment with God's will. Healing through love and forgiveness is not only about the act of forgiving others but also about accepting God's forgiveness for ourselves. Just as we are called to forgive others, we must also accept that God's forgiveness is available to us, no matter how deeply we have sinned. We often carry guilt and shame for the wrongs we have committed, but God's forgiveness, when embraced, cleanses us and makes us whole. As we forgive others, we also experience the freedom of being forgiven, allowing us to release the burdens of our past and step into the future with renewed hope. The healing that comes through suffering, love, and forgiveness is not limited to our own hearts. As we extend love and forgiveness to others, we become instruments of healing in their lives as well. By forgiving those who have hurt us, we not only break the cycle of pain and resentment but also offer the possibility of redemption and restoration. Our forgiveness allows others to experience God's grace, and in doing so, we participate in His work of healing in the world. Furthermore, as we embrace God's love through our suffering, we become more equipped to love others. Suffering has a way of softening our hearts, making us more compassionate and empathetic toward others who are experiencing pain. We become better able to walk alongside those who are suffering, offering them the love and forgiveness that we have received. Through our own healing, we can help to heal others, creating a ripple effect of grace, peace, and reconciliation. In conclusion, suffering is not just an unfortunate part of life, it is a powerful opportunity for spiritual growth and transformation. It teaches us to understand and embrace God's unconditional love, especially in our times of pain and hardship. Through suffering, we are called to forgive, even when it is difficult, and in doing so, we experience the freedom and healing that forgiveness brings. When combined with love and forgiveness, suffering becomes a transformative force, allowing our souls to heal and become more aligned with God's will. As we forgive and love, we open ourselves to the possibility of deeper relationships, both with God and with others. Ultimately, suffering, when viewed through the lens of love and forgiveness, becomes a means of healing, not only for ourselves but for the world around us. Suffering is not a meaningless hardship that we must simply endure. Rather, it is a tool that God uses to refine and shape our souls. Through suffering, we are given the opportunity to deepen our faith, develop patience, embrace humility, and grow in love and forgiveness. While pain and hardship are undoubtedly difficult, they serve a higher purpose in our spiritual development. It is in the crucible of suffering that we are shaped into the people God intends us to be, purified and prepared for the mission He has set before us. Just as gold is refined in the fire, our souls are sharpened through the trials we face, making us stronger, wiser, and more aligned with God's will. Suffering should not be viewed as a punishment or as a sign of God's abandonment. Instead, it is an essential part of our spiritual growth. Through suffering, we are brought closer to understanding our true mission in life. It purifies our hearts, helping us to become more like Christ and to live in accordance with His example of love, patience, and sacrifice. Every trial we face is an opportunity to grow in grace, to be refined and made stronger in our faith. As we endure suffering, we become more attuned to God's divine will, learning to trust in His purpose even when it is difficult to understand. Ultimately, suffering is a vital part of our spiritual development, allowing us to become the individuals God has called us to be. If you are currently experiencing suffering, I encourage you to embrace it as a tool that God is using to refine and shape you. It is natural to want to avoid pain, but know that your suffering is not in vain. Use this time to reflect, grow spiritually, and seek God's guidance. Ask Him to help you see His purpose in your pain, and trust that He is working in your life, even when the path is unclear. Through your suffering, you are being prepared for a greater purpose, and this journey will ultimately bring you closer to understanding God's love and your own divine calling. Remember, suffering can be a gateway to deeper wisdom, greater faith, and a more profound connection with God. If you found this message inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content that will encourage and uplift you in your journey of faith. Your support helps us continue to create resources that can inspire others to embrace their spiritual journey, no matter the challenges they may face. Thank you for being part of this community.